Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
Be bold and take risks. I found that the best experiences I've had in roles are ones where I took the most amount of risk. I think you have to be fearless in taking those risks. Challenge yourself. Don't stay with things that make you comfortable. Be unapologetic. Be yourself. Show up as who you are in your authentic self.
That was Kathleen Fiorello, the head of U.S. Partner Acquisition and Global Capabilities at American Express, and she is our special guest on the 100th episode of the Leaders in Payments podcast. I'm honored to have her on the show this week as we kick off Women Leaders in Payments Month, sponsored by American Express. Kathleen grew up in Wayne, New Jersey, where she had a paper route as a kid. After high school, she attended Florida State University and has had a long, successful career at American Express spanning 25 years. From playing golf on the boys' team in high school, because they didn't have a girls' team back then, to moving to Stockholm, Sweden to run the Nordics market, where she learned several powerful lessons, to attributing much of her success to hard work, Kathleen provides some dynamic messages about listening to your inner voice, taking risks, believing in yourself, and being bold. We also have a fun section in the interview where you'll get to learn more about Kathleen on a more personal level. We've got a great, insightful, and inspiring episode. So let's get started. Hi, Kathleen, and welcome to episode 100 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and more specifically, the first episode in our special Women Leaders in Payments month. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm really excited to be your 100th episode, as well as to be here today to talk about women in payments.
Absolutely. Anytime. So first, tell our audience a little bit about your role today, and then we'll rewind and go back and talk about your journey and how you got here.
Certainly. So I am the head of third-party acquiring at American Express for our partner acquiring business, as well as the owner of all of the global acquisition capabilities. So that really are all the technical capabilities globally for our partners that work with us in third-party acquiring, including all the fun stuff like oversight and know your customer and things like that as well.
Okay. Where did you grow up and what was your life like when you were growing up?
I grew up, if you haven't already noticed by my accent, in the Northeast. So I'm from a small town called Wayne in New Jersey. And so not far away from New York City where I live today. And I grew up, I guess you could say middle class. My mother, prior to having us, was a school teacher. My dad was a lawyer. I went to Catholic school probably from the time I was in kindergarten until I graduated high school, at which point I wanted to go to a very big non-denominational college, which where I ended up was Florida State. So I traveled a bit out of state and went to a very, very big institution where I didn't know as many people as I knew growing up in the small schools that I was at.
Okay. And when you were growing up, would you say you were more like the lemonade stand builder or more the planner or organizer of the Friday night out with your friends?
I didn't have a lemonade stand, but I did have a paper route, kind of like a lemonade stand, but it was a good way to make money very, very young. But I also loved a good organization opportunity with friends, over the weekend during high school, at least when I was allowed to go out.
And during high school, were there extracurricular activities you were involved in?
Yes. Two things, which is really interesting. I was a cheerleader for football and loved dancing because growing up, I always went to dance school. So loved the aspect of that with cheerleading. But I also was a golfer. And the interesting thing about that is at the time that I was in high school, which was in the mid 1980s, they didn't have a golf team for girls. And so I actually was the only female golfer on the boys' golf team because there wasn't an opportunity otherwise for me to play. And I have had experience playing growing up and I wanted to play golf. And they told me there was only a golf club for boys. And I said, well, that's the one I want to be on then. And I think that really is my first foray into, anything boys can do, girls can do as well, and sometimes even better.
Yeah, we might come back to that later in the conversation. That's interesting. So when you were growing up and you got in trouble, what did your mom say to you?
if you grew up in my time, I don't know if people might get a chuckle out of this, but I grew up in a half Irish, half Italian household. And so my mom was a great cook and we always got threatened with the wooden spoon. And so the minute we were acting up and the wooden spoon came out, you knew it was time to either run in any direction possible so that you weren't getting hit, or you figured out the right arm move to start to utilize to shield where the wooden spoon would have the least amount of impact when it landed. And that became a bit like a Wonder Woman type of move, to be honest. It was never done with malice. Always with it's just the way to stop us from doing, whatever my brother or sister and I were into at the time.
Okay, so you had siblings?
I did. I'm a middle child, and so I have a younger brother and an older sister. But we're 2 years apart, both up and down. Okay.
Do you remember, besides the paper route, what your first job was?
Yeah, I think it was the paper route. If I, in thinking back, I think a combination of the paper route and because I grew up in a block that had tons of kids. When you were old enough as a girl, you couldn't wait to babysit all the little kids. So I was also a babysitter as well.
Okay. You mentioned that you went to Florida State. So what did you major in there?
I majored in political science and minored in Italian. And so part of the Italian minor was due to the fact that I studied abroad in Italy in my junior year. And so got most of my classes and curriculum enough so that I was able to minor in Italian studies. But I majored in political science thinking I was going to follow in my father's footsteps and become a lawyer. And part of that was I loved a good negotiation. And so while I never went on to law school, I am very involved in contract negotiations and the like with partners, which actually is an area that I love.
Okay. And then how did you get your job there at American Express?
So I've been with American Express over 25 years now, which is kind of crazy to say. I'm sort of dating myself, but it was really, I started because prior to coming to American Express, I was in marketing. And as part of my role at a marketing agency, I bought media. So I bought media spots for radio and newspapers. And I came in working for consumer travel at the time. And I was one of their media buyers for all of the media placements that we made for our consumer travel business.
Okay. So from a political science into marketing, how was that connection made?
What I liked about the political science was the bachelor arts and the broad skill sets that it gave me across a host of things. And it just kind of led me when I left college. I knew I wanted to work in New York and in a big company. And I think I wanted to be in front of customers, right? I tend to be a bit of an extrovert and I do well and get my energy from people. And the job that I had at the time with marketing had a lot of customer engagement. And I think that attracted me to it. Similar to when I was thinking about political science and going into law, interacting with and solving problems for people and issues. It has similar compromises. And then I think just over time, you learn about different parts of businesses. And that's what really then started to interest me more into going more into marketing and then more into customer facing things.
Okay. Well, we're going to pivot away from your career for a minute and have a fun little section here where I'm going to ask you 10 questions, sort of rapid fire questions. And if you can answer with one-word answers, the goal is so that our audience can get to know you a little better. And then we'll get back to your career at Amex and talk about some more women in leadership type things, if that's okay.
For sure.
Okay. So what song do you always sing along with?
Brown Eyed Girl.
What are you watching at the moment on Netflix?
Actually, I'm Team Hulu right now. Handmaid's Tale.
Okay. Team iOS or Team Android?
iOS version 14.6.
Okay. What did you have for breakfast?
Avocado toast.
What's the most used app on your phone?
Instagram.
If you could time travel, what period of history would you go back to?
I'd actually go to the future. I don't like looking back. I like looking forward.
Dog or cat?
I don't have animals, but I'd have to pick dog.
Cake or pie?
Cupcakes.
If you had a movie about your life, who would play you?
I thought about this one. Laura San Giacomo. And if you don't know her, she was Kit in Pretty Woman and the lead in Just Shoot Me. And a lot of people just say we have similar nuances in the way we talk.
Okay. Ocean or mountains?
Ocean. Sound of the waves lapping is very soothing for me.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate you entertaining us with that.
Made me have a think for a few minutes about some of those things.
So let's get back to your career. So I think you started to talk a little bit about it, but you've been at Amex for 25 years. So maybe talk about you came into the company and sort of the roles you've had over time and your kind of career growth up until, where we are today. Can you kind of explain that journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could talk about the details, but maybe if I talk about it from the perspective of pulling back and the journey of why I took the jobs that I've done, because I've had a number of different ones. But when I first started, it was all about jobs that I thought were fun and that I could do, right? I was good at media buying and media planning, and it was fun. And so the job came up for, consumer travel, and I took it because I knew how to do that, and it was something I liked. And then as I moved from there to customer-facing roles, the roles that first attracted me were the ones that I was, that had similar interests to me. So I was a client manager for Disney and for airlines and for travel. And those interested me because Disney, who doesn't like the memories of Disney and travel, like all the different places you get to see and do, and having lived in Italy and the adventures that I had when I was traveling through Europe, it was like, travel was very appealing to me. So that was why would I take a job, running and being a customer for those? As I started to get more mature in my career, and I started to take on mentorships and really start thinking about what I wanted to do, a lot of people were telling me and asking me, what I wanted to be when I grow up? And do you want to be a generalist or do you want to be a specialist? And it's important to decide those things because it takes you down different decisions and career paths that you make. As a specialist, like if I wanted to stay in marketing, that I would increasingly take jobs that brought me higher through the lenses or levels of different marketing roles. But if I wanted to be more of a generalist, you wanted to put more tools in your toolbox if a GM was what you aspired to be. And so I went and started to pick the career path of I really wanted to be more of a GM. So I started looking at roles that played on my experiences, but also challenged me to learn new things, as I could say, as I added tools to my toolbox, right? So I chose jobs that somewhat had a discomfort for me in terms of, I don't know how to do about a third of this job. That means I'm going to have to learn more and buckle down. And I found those to be really rewarding because they did help bring out the best in me and help teach me new skills that I hadn't already had. As I then got through those levels of manager to director and VP, I really started to think about jobs that would give me a much better roundabout GM. And what do people look for with general managers? P&L experience, people, broader people leadership experiences, different levels of complexity. And so what I wound up doing, and advice I've always given to people, is as jobs became available, I started to put together a list of the pros and cons of a job. And anytime the cons outweighed the pros, I would usually pick that role because those were the roles that pushed me outside of my comfort zone and taught me the most about things. And those roles were things that I decided to do, like leave the United States to go run the Nordics based out of Stockholm, where I didn't know a single person. I didn't speak the language. I'm single, so didn't have a family. So I was going all by myself to this new country in this new job that I didn't know anything about. It was probably one of the most rewarding experiences I had. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about different cultures and what's important. And it pushed me outside of my comfort zone in ways that at the time I couldn't imagine. But when I look back now, the experiences that I learned were pretty unbelievable. After that, I decided that I wanted roles that had a bigger remits globally because I could add value because of the fact that I was sitting in a market and I understood the global nature of the business. And then finally, as I thought about my next level roles after that, I chose balance about the ones that drove my passions and my intellectual curiosity, but still allowed me to be successful in running different parts of the business. And that led me to where I am today. It was a different combination of the fact that I'm passionate about the payments and commerce space, and I know a lot about it from my other roles. I'm passionate about leading people. I'm passionate about helping women be successful. And all of those things combined help me. That's where I get my energy from. And then I can then learn different things about this business that I'm running. But at the same time, I can help grow this business because of my experiences that I can bring to bear.
So any of those moves that you made, were any of them lateral or were they always moving up?
Many of them were lateral. And I decided that sometimes the title of a promotion wasn't as beneficial as the experiences of a lateral. Because it was always when I took laterals, when I could have taken promotionals, but I took lateral and I came out a stronger band level than when I was in, so that by the time I got promoted, I was already performing in that level. And so I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up. I sort of hit the ground running, right? I was already thinking at that different level, making decisions. I had the different experiences that I can bring to bear. I have always told people that some of my best jobs were jobs that were lateral, even though I could have chosen jobs that were promotional in nature. Because for me, it's about the job content, not necessarily about the title. And as long as the organization values you, and values you is all about what you define as valuable. It could be salary, it could be benefits, it could be the opportunity to work or have them relocate you to a different country. Some of those things were more valuable to me than the salary itself. And all of those things in combination were things that helped me make the choice of the jobs that I chose at the time.
Okay. Obviously, you've been successful throughout your career. What would you say are your guiding principles?
Yeah, my North Star, so to speak, right?
Right.
For me, and I think I said this to somebody earlier who I was interviewing, and she had apologized for something. And I said, please don't apologize. And that's advice I'd give all women. Be unapologetic into who you are. Stay true to yourself, because I think we do ourselves a disservice sometimes by apologizing for being bold or for being direct, because I think we're taught that, or inevitably it's just some of the learned nature. So some of my guiding principles are always about staying true to myself. There are things that I always have to work on. Sometimes being direct is a good thing, but you have to know when to flex that directness given situations so that it doesn't come off as unintended directness, or you have to qualify the directness before you go into it, or you have to let people know who you are a bit before you go in with your direct nature. And so I've had instances where I haven't done those things and people read me the wrong way, but my directness is not intended to be controversial. It's just, I like to be clear. And as I said, I like to live unapologetically so that people always know where I stand.
Okay. And this next question is kind of a two-part question, but they're obviously interrelated. Who inspired you along the way and why? That's the first part. And then did you or do you still have mentors?
Yes, those are good questions. If I look at leaders that inspire me, there is one particular at American Express still that I have had the pleasure to work with over the years, and who is actually one of my very close mentors. Her name is Glenda McNeil, and she's president of the Strategic Partnership Group at American Express. And it was very early on when I worked for her, when I was a manager, that she gave me the opportunity to be a director. And it was because she said to me, she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, right? So she had the confidence for me that I didn't yet have as a relatively person. And she was the one that used to ask me questions about what I wanted to do when I grew up and help me think about the ways that I should approach a job. And she is, if you don't know her, she's very successful in the company. And, she has always had the guiding star of like being who she is and speaking up for what she believes. And if you know her at all, you'd know her to be this tiny petite little woman that when you walk into the room, it's like, don't underestimate Glenda McNeil, because she's just wicked smart and just somebody that I've always looked up to as an amazing leader and mentor. And she's given me just such great advice and things to think about in my career. And then, of course, my mother, I'd have to say, because she's always told me growing up that, women, just like men, put their pants on one leg at a time, right? We're no different than men in that regard, right? So don't underestimate or underappreciate what it is you can do, which is, I think, one of the things that led me to pushing to be on the golf team when I was in high school, to say, listen, I want to play golf. I know how to play golf. Why should I not be allowed to play golf just because I'm a woman? And my mom's like, that's right. You go tell that coach that you want to be on the team. And I think that's also given me a bit of courage to do things and push boundaries as well.
Okay. On the mentor, I'm going to dive deeper into that. Was she a mentor from early on in your career all the way till now, or just at a point in time?
Early on, because I worked from her. And then over the years, I've stayed close as she has moved up and then I have progressed. So I've always kept in touch with her. And it's at times when I'm trying to make decisions, advice on, hey, here's how I'm thinking about something. Do you have a few minutes you can spend with me? And she's just, she's always given me the time when I've needed it. I don't abuse that, but I've always utilized my time with her to the best ability and asking for advice and direction and how to think about things. Am I thinking about it right? Did I forget to think about something? And she's been really good about it just because she's able to pull from her experience and she's very thoughtful about, she's not tells me what to do, but she asks me very thoughtful questions that make me step back and ask the questions of myself that I may not be seeing. Because sometimes, when you're so close to those problems or opportunities, you can't see beyond what your own thought is. And she really helps pull that out and asking different questions that help me get personally to the right decision without her having to say, this is what you should do.
What is one characteristic that you believe every woman leader should possess?
I have a few. Be bold and take risks. I found that the best experiences I've had in roles are ones where I took the most amount of risk. I think you have to be fearless in taking those risks. Challenge yourself. Don't stay with things that make you comfortable. And then I think I've said it before, be unapologetic, be yourself, show up as who you are in your authentic self. I find that I do best with leaders that are authentic. And so I always try to be as authentic as I can for a leader because I find that people can see through inauthenticity. And I connect better with people when I can bring my true self to bear.
Okay. And what do you do today to ensure that you're continuing to grow and develop as a leader?
I always check in with myself at the beginning of the year and mid-year because, we have processes here at American Express where we set goals and we talk about our development plans. And while, sometimes it's easy to go through the process and to check boxes, I really do ask myself some questions like, am I still happy with the job that I'm in? Does it still bring me passion? What are the things I want to get out of my job this year personally and professionally? What does success look like for me at the end of the year? Even if that success, and I try not to define it on like the ratings that you can get by the organization, because some of that is really about the fact that you have to have curves and things like that. It's about what is success defined for me personally. And when I get to the different checkpoints, I check in on that. Am I still passionate about what I do? Did I do the things I said I was going to do at the beginning of the year, at mid-year? And then even though numbers may not define my success, do I think that I did a good job this year? And do my people feel engaged? Is my team happy? Are my partners in a good spot? Those are the things that I do for myself, just to check in to make sure that I'm doing well as defined by me.
So for that part of sort of your self-reflection, do you get away from everyone and have a specific way you do that? Or is it just more kind of a part of the process of what you have to do, from a work environment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you'd say pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I'd probably have just spent some time in my own space at home. But when home becomes your office, right, and the lines blur, I typically don't do it in an office setting, to be honest. I do it in my own setting because I do it more from, I look inwards, not like how the company defines it. I use some of the tools that the company has to answer some of those questions, but it's not necessarily things that I will put on formal paper and, submit for my career plan and my talent desires and things like that. It's something that I think I put in my own journal book. They say, write manifestations on a daily basis. They say when you're doing mindfulness, it's a little bit like that, to be honest. You take a moment, not in the scope of work, but in the scope of yourself and bringing your true self to bear. And I do it that way.
Okay. Well, what advice, and I know you've already given some, but think of the future generation of female or women leaders. What advice would you give them today?
No role is out of bounds, and that you shouldn't ever let anyone define your destiny. And think big. There is no job that you can't do if you put your mind to it. And I say that because there were so many jobs that I decided to take that were so risky for me that I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I have that skill set. I don't think I can do it. And it was my own lack of confidence that held me back. And so don't let that inner voice that isn't as sharp as the confidence that you probably will have over time as you get more senior in roles. Don't let that talk you out of opportunities, because there are so many great things you can do if you just put your mind to it and work hard, right? I think we're all smart in different capacities and we can all learn, and you just have to be open to it and not afraid of it. And don't let people tell you where you should go or what box you should sit in. And yes, your leaders will assess you and things like that. And there's a way to listen to that, but don't let it also be the defining point of saying that you can't do something because your leader said that you should be focused on just this or just that. If you believe you can do it, then you should try to pursue that to the best extent possible.
Yeah. And I like that, getting outside of your comfort zone. I heard someone refer to it as you can't read the label on the box when you're in the box.
Yes.
So I think that's
it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I talk myself half the time out of things. It's the inner voice. There's two parts of my inner voice. There's the good inner voice, and then there's the negative inner voice. And I'm always like, let that good inner voice shine through, because that's the one you should be listening to.
And have you ever been afraid on the job?
Oh, for sure. Yes. And it was probably the one, where I relocated to a new country, right? And I was in the Nordics, in Stockholm, running a team, having responsibility for the entire market. And I was in a country that I knew I had very little knowledge about. And I was the first female to run the business there. I was the first non-Swede to run the business there, right? So can you imagine me, the outsider coming from New York, a little bit louder than a typical Swede would be. And there was the way that they did things, and there was the way that I did things. And it was a little scary in the beginning, right? I didn't get it right the first time, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was scared. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? I was doubting myself, my leadership. And, I was resilient. I wasn't going to let it break me. I figured out how to make it work. I sat down with the team. I worked things through. We were transparent. Had to really dig inside myself and have an appreciation for how important culture was, how important diversity was, and the role that played in assumptions and leadership and partnership. And in breaking through those things, it was a real learning experience for me, but it was so scary when I was sitting in it. And I doubted myself for a few months, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be successful, right? And it was that inner voice that kept that inner voice and that lack of confidence. But it was the other good part of the inner voice to say, you've got this. There is nothing you can't do. Like, pick yourself up and figure it out, right? And it may not work, but when you first ride a bike, you fall off a couple of times before you figure out how to ride it. And that's what I said. It's okay that you're going to fall down a couple of times. Just brush yourself off, get back up on that bike and learn how to ride it. And I did. And I learned so much from that experience that I've carried through with me on my other leadership journeys.
Yeah. What would you say are the main lessons that you learned from that? Because I think it's a great sort of a broader analogy of really taking a risk and walking into a situation where you don't feel qualified, you don't feel like you can do it, and it's with people you don't know, it's in a culture you don't understand, right? And you did such a great job. Maybe you failed, but you got back up. So what are the major lessons that you learned that you brought back, say, for your, like you said, for your next job and for your leadership skills and for your future?
You really have to appreciate and respect the differences of culture and diversity and the role that it plays in relationships and in building trust. Communication and transparency is so important. So one of the things I probably didn't do when I started out was telling people when I got there, I learn how I learn, right? I learn as a person by asking a lot of questions. But because I didn't qualify that with the team, when I asked all of these questions, it came off, right? Because of my direct nature, I'm a little bit more aggressive than a typical Swede. It came off as me questioning how they did business. So there was a mismatch between what my actions were and what my intentions were. And I didn't qualify that because I didn't think I needed to. And so what those little things taught me is the appreciation of cultural differences and nuances, right? One of the things that I learned is that the Swedish language has so fewer words than the US language. And so when I came in, as you can imagine, I'm New York, so I have a strong accent. I talk fast, right? I'm a fast talker. And here, all the Swedes who speak Swedish, they can all speak English, but it's not their first language. I'm talking fast. They're trying to translate it and then come up with the answer. But there's so fewer words in the Swedish language that there's often this uncomfortable pause. And the pause wasn't because they didn't know. It's just they were formulating and translating how to say it in English. Now, looking back, oh my God, the fact that most Swedes can speak 2 to 3 languages. Here, Kathleen can speak English. And when I have enough wine, I can bring back my Italian studies and speak some good Italian. So the appreciation for the language differences and what that means and how it translations, I've had a much greater appreciation, especially as I lead global teams now, for those different nuances. And then qualifying, telling people ahead of time how I lead, what are the things that I do, so that if you don't know me, I don't come off as something that's not intended. So we start off on the right foot. So the transparency, I think, is also very important. And I learned those two, and they've been very successful learnings as I've taken on bigger responsibility and managed more global teams and had to ask questions to learn the business.
Sure. So what is one thing that you know now about women and work, or women in the business world, that you wish you had known earlier in your career?
I think especially in the last few years, as there has been an acknowledgement from the workplace globally that there is a time, especially in the diversity inclusion, for women to have their moment and fair share of jobs at the top. And I think in looking back earlier in my career, I put myself in more of a box of what I thought was possible. And I don't know that that's the same for women now, as we see more women sitting as, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and the first female vice president. I think it's more about thinking bigger earlier of what's possible in your career, and sky's the limit. Right. I think early on in my career, I probably limited my thinking about the things I could do because of the things I was good at, and not thinking about the possibilities of what is achievable. I don't know that it would have changed the trajectory of what I do and how I do it, but it certainly would have been a little bit less limiting for how I thought about my future in my younger years.
Yeah, sure. And think about the young women coming out of college now that have seen successful women, like you mentioned. They don't have that limited belief, right? I mean, it's not sort of ingrained in them, and from an early age, like it might have been like for you and I, who are very similar in age, I think. So it was a much different time. So that's interesting. Final question: how much of your success do you attribute to hard work versus luck?
Oh God, I think hard work. I've always believed, I think, growing up, when I grew up and seeing my parents during the time that they grew up, my father worked 3 jobs to put himself through law school, and did a stint in the army to, again, help pay for his college education. It was always instilled in me through the values my parents had that hard work was important for success, right? And so I think in seeing that from my own family growing up, and then going to work, I was always about, like, in order to move up, you first had to demonstrate that you could do it. And that came through hard work, right? I've never really been afraid of rolling up my sleeves if there was a problem with my team and digging in, right? I'm not the type of person that will sit here and say, I need you to do this, this, and this. I won't ask somebody to do something if I'm also not willing to do it myself. And so I think it's always instilled with me a work ethic that, most things are earned, not given. And so I don't know that, luck plays a part, but there are some times when, right place, right time, that you get to meet somebody, or you have an exchange with somebody who then later is the hiring manager for that job. And that exchange left a really good impression, right? That sometimes is about luck, that you have those moments But I think if you back that up with a reputation that you've built yourself for as a hard worker, that will come through more than the luck.
I agree. I think there's probably some luck on the golf course, right? If the ball happens to bounce down the cart path another extra 100 yards, that's probably just some good luck, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything about my golf game is luck, to be honest. I don't play as regularly as I was able to when I was younger, and I wish I could. So I'm a little bit, for those that play, don't look at my game. It's kind of awful. My swing is awful. Everything about it, but I do enjoy playing.
Well, great. Well, Kathleen, we've covered a lot of ground about your career, and you've given a lot of great advice for younger generations and other female leaders. So, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, other than that, I think we're talking here about women in payments, and I get so excited to see how many more women over the years have gotten involved with payments and commerce, and even women that have had, started their own startups that were then sold to bigger companies. And I just keep saying, like, payments and commerce is such an exciting place to be in. And I love the fact that more and more women are entering this space in particular. And so I keep telling people, keep going. And again, no role in this space is out of bounds for your success. So thank you so much, Greg, for having me. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you about my career journey.
No, thank you. And I know your time is very valuable. So thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You have a great one.
You too. And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.